Thank you very much for the kind introduction. One reason why academics like to travel, because they get praised in the introduction much more than we can ever expect at home. So thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you very much that I can present my somehow humble thoughts, what I think democratic resilience is and can be. So I'm very happy that we heard before the excellent presentations and the concrete facts and data about democratic backsliding and, to some extent, democratic resilience as well. And this is my cognitive map, which leads me and therefore you as well through my talk. I have 4 steps. I'm talking about very, very briefly and not that sophisticated like you, Marina, on the erosion of democracy or backsliding of democracy. And then I will focus, what is it? Democratic resilience. We are all using this term. We have some ideas about it, but it is still somehow a young discipline in democracy research, and therefore I try to conceptualize the term. And then at the end, I will talk briefly about possible interventions, democratic interventions into a backsliding democracy in order to strengthen democratic resilience. So to some extent, I'm presenting a systemic point of view because I think a systemic point of view, if it is, so to say, based on empirical research, can allow us to have 3 different views. It discovers the points of strength and weakness of a specific democratic regime. It also helps us to select forms of democratic interventions in different sorts of the part of the democratic regime. And third, it allows us to reflect which are the consequences if we intervene in one sphere or one part of the democratic regime, which consequences does it have for others? Just to give you an example, now in my country, in Germany, there is a hot discussion and very controversial discussion whether the Constitutional Court should ban the right-wing populist party, which has to some extent extremist tendencies as well. To ban a party is always a problematic thing. What does it mean for the which consequences can we expect? Does the population accept it? And if such a party has 40%, for example, in the 5 East German Länder, single states, would they comply to such a decision? What would it mean for polarization? What would it mean for political violence? What would it mean if 1/3 of the population will be told, you can vote, this is a free electoral system, but not this party. You have to vote the other parties. So this is one point why I do think we should reflect about the possibilities, opportunities, and especially the consequences of those interventions. This is sorry, Marina, it is so simple if I compare it to yours. What I did here is at the year 2000. I'm looking to the 33 or 34 best democracies in the world. I'm not talking about India, but at that time I was looking at Poland and Hungary, which only a few years later degenerated in some kind of defective democracy or competitive authoritarianism. And what you see here is a tremendous upward trend in the second half of the terrible 20th century. And there is a peak of this democratization process. And the peak is 2007, 2008. And it coincides with the financial crisis. The causal links are not that clear up to now. So we have then from 2008, year per year per year, and deterioration of the average democratic quality of those 33 countries. So there is a trend of backsliding, and it is now for 15 and 18 years. And again, I'm looking here at the best democracies, not on democracies which are bordering to a kind of electoral authoritarianism or something else. What is democratic resilience? I present you a definition like this. Resilience is the ability of a system to absorb, to withstand, and to recover from disturbances and stressors without undergoing a regime change, while maintaining the basic norms, structures, and function of a democracy. So 3 different things: to absorb, withstand, and to recover. And I tried to put together 4 building blocks for this kind of systematic view on democratic resilience. I tried to consider the basic functions of a democratic system, and we were talking about this morning, about institutional opportunity structures, constraints, and also opening new avenues for democratic action. Then I would like to look at actors, political actors. We were talking about democratic resilience as a kind of dream, or can it be a choice, which is not so easy to respond. And then I want especially to look to interdependencies of these different blocks I presented here. And this is a model. It is maybe something too much, but this is a kind of propaganda of something I tried to put together. And I singled out 4 major arenas where politics is done and which are important for the output and the outcomes of political decision. There is a first level, the constitutional level, where the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary have to interact. And just to give you an example, if you have the United States of America, where we see a very fast and rapid aggrandizement of the power of the executive. And we see how the executive colonize the judicial system, stuff it with their own people. So you see how important it is that there is a specific balance between the three, and you see in countries of democratic backsliding always a disbalance between these three constitutional powers. And of course, we have to look to the system of the most important actors, political parties. Here, the major attack against the quality of democracy and the stability and the resilience of democracies are at this time right or far-right populist parties. How to deal with them? I come back to this point later on. And then civil society. Even we sometimes overestimate the importance of civil society, that civil society can do everything and can correct what politics and the evil political parties cannot do. They are important. And we heard it this morning as well. We have the importance of free media, the importance of interest groups, of NGOs, of associations. Civic associations are a base of democracy, and the political community, the unity of the people. And we heard it also, shouldn't be against the experience of the 20th century. It shouldn't be the traditional ethnically driven kind of nationalism or national identity. However, as much I admire Jürgen Habermas, this is something, the so-called constitutional patriotism, this is something intellectuals like very, very much. But it's to some extent a very thin identity, and therefore it may work for parts of the population, but we see it at this time with the revival of this ethnic nationalism that it isn't that strong that we would like to wish. And this is if you have such a political system with these four arenas or four levels. There are external, not only external, we have, of course, internal challenges. Here, paradigmatically, I sorted out four of these external challenges. Of course, climate, migration, economic crises or economic inequality, and now what we did not expect a decade or 2 decades ago, war and external intervention. So the political system has to cope with these external challenges. And as I have already said, I repeat it here again, there are 3 forms of democratic resilience simply to withstand these attacks from the right-wing political parties and to withstand other interventions into the democratic system, which sometimes or quite often is not enough. So political systems have to be flexible. They have to adapt to new circumstances. Institutions and actors which were quite successful before might not be any more successful because the environment, the context has changed. And if you look to countries like Poland, where we saw an democratic alternation in government, now we see how difficult it is to recover democracy with democratic means. And we will see if we really have to witness 3 more years of Donald Trump, how much damage it can be done to a democracy and how fast it can be done and how long it takes to re-establish a democratic climate in a democratic system. And here I think this is somehow important for the futures. Some of the functions a democratic system has to fulfill in order to be resilient in the future. It has to understand the future itself. And this is what democracies are not very good of. They may listen to science and they sometimes even follow, not that often, but sometimes they do. But you have 3 or 4 years period between the elections, and rational political actors want to be re-elected. And therefore, the longer perspective of democracy is very often absent among political elites. And to solve problems. I think this is one of the strongest things to secure a democratic resilience. If those challenges are correctly confronted and where political actors and institutions are able to solve these problems. And to remind you with a kind of old-fashioned term, we are living in capitalist democracies, and the capitalism does produce inequality and even wants sometimes to produce inequality. But one of the core principles of democracy is equality, political equality. And there is a close link. Inequality, socioeconomic inequality, produces also, to some extent, political inequality. Very briefly, to look what can be done, what has to be done on these 4 arenas. I was already talking about rebalancing the executive. It's not only that people like Donald Trump or politicians like Donald Trump disbalancing executive and legislative. It is also, if you have an open world economy, then the executive will be much stronger than a legislature which is in the domestic context. They are not going, the parliaments, to G7 or G20 or present in NATO, and even not very much in the European Union. So re-strengthening parliaments and keeping the autonomy of the judiciary, it's very, very important. And we heard it this morning as well. The parliaments are extremely important, but it's not enough. The people expect that institutions open. They open deliberative arenas, citizen assemblies, and sometimes even referenda. And I think citizen assemblies is something which can be rolled out much more than it has been done up to now. Last point here, what we know very much is in times of crisis, citizens are looking much more to the outcome than to the income. We may not like it, but if you look at social experiments and surveys, they are looking at outcomes, and not only right-wing oriented citizens, but also left ecological one, because they could argue the most important thing is to survive, to reduce the increase or to reduce the climate crisis, because this is a matter of the survival of the manhood. Parties and party system, I have a look at the clock here, very Stalinistic. parties and party system, I think we should distinguish between clearly anti-system parties and what Juan Linz called semi-loyal parties. And these right-wing populist parties are very often semi-loyal. Sometimes, maybe in my country, you have more real anti-system parties. But the parties which are in decline, especially the catch-all parties, which were so important for building bridges during the second half of the 20th century, they have to strengthen their responsiveness to the citizen, but the representativeness as well. Civic culture and civil society, I pick up something we heard from Suja and from Stefano this morning. We can distinguish two different sorts of trust or social capital. The one is bridging social capital, and it's clear this is what we have to produce. And the high trust bonding social capital is very clear distinguishing in and out. And they are demolishing bridges. They don't, very often, if it comes to ethnic communities, to religious communities as well. But what we have to produce in our society is bridging social capital. The political community, so the sense of belongingness, I think I heard this morning, the sense of belongingness that the people have this emotions and the sense they belong to it. They are not excluded. They are not at the margin. They can be proud of belonging to a political community, which I like much more than the term nation. And no doubt, and this is what you are doing here, paying respect to diversity. And we should avoid, we very much should avoid to exclude the others as not moral, as amoral, because then you cannot debate anymore. But this is a fine red line. We may discuss about it also. I heard this morning softening socioeconomic and sociocultural cleavages. And what I would like to add, fair burden sharing. And this is also an experience we know that in times of crisis, the inequality increases. And the lower half of the society pays our shoulders more burden than the richest 10 or 1% of our society. And of course, it has to be redistributed more equally, what the sociologist Standoff once called life chances. It's not only about money and property, it's about life chances we are talking. I come to the end. We are living in a decade of multiple unresolved and to some extent unresolvable crises if we are thinking about, at least for the next time to come, if we think about the climate question. And no doubt the major attack against our democracies are coming at this time from right-wing populist parties. Nevertheless, I'm talking about the Democrats, should avoid to counter these illiberal parties with illiberal measures. This is a slippery slope which democracy should not go along with. I end with building bridges between nationalists and internationalists or supranationalists, cosmopolitans which want to have a complete open world with communitarians, people who feel more protected in their municipalities and sometimes nation state, well-educated, less educated, epistemizers and deniers of climate change, of pandemics, and a fair burden sharing. Depolarize conflicts, don't depluralize politics. Thank you very much. 6 seconds minus. I hope you are tolerant enough.